Good morning, everybody. It's Coffee and Politics 101 with Sydney Walker. And today, again, topic I've always wanted to have and discuss. It was part of the earlier shows that I did when I was happy to have 200 people watching the shows to talk about the Federal Reserve Bank and the rating system that is done and rating report that anyone can actually walk into any bank that serves their community and ask for a copy to see who's getting loans from the bank. But it wasn't as robust as I wanted it to be. Lo and behold, in the future, I did not know James McGee, I know him as Jay McGee, was going to come along and be able to have this dialogue with me this morning. So good morning, Jay.
Good morning.
All right. So you did a piece on WFAA that talked about, redlining in the city of Dallas and how we don't have a wealth of services. Primarily, that piece was focused on banks that are south of 30. And I know from just my personal history of growing up in South Dallas, when Chase and Bank of America opened originally under Bank One and Nations Bank. And what that meant to us to actually have a bank in our area. So you brought up some really great things, but I do want you to talk about Southern Dallas Progress and your nonprofit and the work that you are doing before we really jump into the topic.
Okay, so I'm James McGee, President Chair of Southern Dallas Progress Community Development Corporation. We are a nonprofit focusing on high poverty, high minority, areas of Southern Dallas. Kind of main focus, South Dallas Fair Park and most of South Oak Cliff. We do that through financial literacy, small minority business development, most businesses that are under 300,000. Housing as it relates to policy, zoning, and those wonderful things, and then also infill development. But I am a former banker, regulatory compliance officer, and so we've been actually studying, more in depth as far as how do we drive or demand investments, in Southern Dallas.
Okay. And it seems like, it's just this area that is so neglected. And seeing that, my folks moved into South Dallas because that was the only area that they could move in. And hearing about, the rich history that is there and how the Walkers would have been considered well-to-do Blacks in the area during that time. And to see how there were tons of houses, tons of kids, tons of small businesses. There were grocery stores over in the area, be it corporations or the mom and pop type. All of that just kind of disappeared during my lifetime from when I was born to now being a super adult. I'm calling myself a super adult. To just watch all of that disappear. And to hear that, we have trouble getting information, getting loans, getting the help that we want and need to be able to create businesses that we say we want. Can you hear me? Or are you frozen? Oh, okay. All right. So, let's jump into, first off, what is redlining? For those that may not understand what the topic is, because it isn't just in the financial sector, but I do want to focus it today on the financial sector.
Okay, so that's actually an interesting question. So I went back to find out where it originated from. So it actually originated in the 1960s. John McKnight kind of coined the term redlining, but it pretty much defined the discriminatory practices of avoiding investment in communities where unfavorable or high-risk demographics, typically with large minority populations. I mean, so that's in a sense, is the original definition of it. But redlining today is pretty much, under investing in certain areas, and those areas for right now, like are high minority populations. I mean, so it's normally referred to as far as banks. And I reminded somebody yesterday. I mean, it also happens in the school district. It also happens within the city of Dallas. I mean, so there are more players as far as in the game than just the banks. But I mean, the banks hold the capital, so they hold the ultimate key, to driving investments into the community.
That is really interesting because I have had quite a few conversations about, how how we're living in the post-colonial, some say neo-colonial times, and how young the United States is, and seeing that, being post-civil rights kids, that it seems that not much has changed as far as the blight that we're having in our community, and being able to access those things that help us to generate wealth for future kids that haven't come along yet, so we can leave them a legacy. You have a comment on
Yeah, I
that?
mean, and it's weird that the blight still exists. I mean, so even what I've been doing is kind of look at the formerly redline areas that were back in '77, and you look at those communities today, and most of those are located in Southern Dallas, and they're still disinvested. And you do have a few that are up north, the Uptown area, but that's was a desirable area because it's right there by downtown. I mean, so they made a conscious choice to invest there. But then you go right down the street to South Dallas. Why didn't they make that same choice to invest, in that community? I mean, so it's only been 44 years since that law was passed. So within some of our lifetimes, I mean, but it's still, we need major investment. We need equity as far as when it comes to banks.
Right. Well, it just seems that it takes a long time for it to occur. And that was part of the discussion with having about, how young the United States is, and how, we're still kind of living out some of these ways of being that kind of started this entire country. So when you start a leg up with taking other people's property and making it yours, you now have something to bargain with and go to a bank and say that you have this collateral, that if you default on your loan, someone can take this asset, this piece of collateral that you have, and pay back the loan because they're able to sell it. And I'm just putting it in, real basic layman terms here. But it just seems like there's this, and maybe it's just me and my way of thinking, because, I have my own kind of set of conspiracies that I subscribe to. We got an Amber Alert here. So we have a Federal Reserve Bank here in Dallas that is part of the reason that the CRA Act of 1977 was put in place. So you have a Federal Reserve Bank in your area, and it is supposed to help to eliminate that blight, that de-investment, that struggle, as you can, one way of putting it, that our communities have, to overcome that and get the reinvestment put back into them, so we can all sit at the table and have the same kind of meal, and we're not sitting there having pork and beans and rice or syrup sandwiches, because that's the struggle that we're on while somebody else is eating filet mignon.
Correct. I mean, so the Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve of Dallas, as well as the other regulators, I mean, they're supposed to monitor and to prevent, in a sense, redlining. I mean, so you have one that's, here close to downtown, that's on Pearl Street, is for the Federal Reserve. And so right on the other side of 30, you have this huge disparity, in a sense, right in front of their face. And for years, nobody has called it out. Luckily, Channel 8, we worked together to put together that story. But we put together that story was identifying information in which they already knew or should have known, but
Okay.
they're the rule enforcer.
So here they're tasked with making sure that the banks follow the policy, the rules, making sure that underserved communities are getting the loans, getting the services for the zip code that that neighborhood bank provides. Yet we're still not getting the service that we're supposed to be protected and enforced to get. Is that's what we're seeing? That's what was the result of your piece that you did with WFAA.
Yes, I mean, and so I mean, as I mentioned on the story, they're not doing their job. You know, we're bringing forth the data and the information clearly states that by them being here, I mean, it's where the minorities, where the majority of the low to moderate income census tract, that's all in Southern Dallas. I mean, so they should ensure each bank in which they supervise is doing their part as far as investing in that community. And that's the small banks, and that's especially the big banks.
Okay.
I mean, so they have to do a better job as far as that. And then another thing as far as that, a lot of the banks are doing the bare minimum when it comes, you know, to investing in Southern Dallas. And I think it needs to be more of, you know, equity as far as their investment and their concentrated effort. Because I mean, like, it's Southern Dallas has been neglected for more than 50 years. I mean, it's time for them to step up to the plate.
Yes. So, okay, so we're talking about the CRA. For those that don't know, it's the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977 that was put in place to make sure that communities of color were being invested in, not de-invested, but anybody who has been around for roughly 50, 60 years of their lives can see that that is not the case. So I challenge anyone to go into the banks of Southern Dallas. So two, Nations Bank now is Bank of America on MLK, that is next door to the Fiesta. Chase is also on MLK, which is right across the street from the MLK Community Center. And so be it you go to a bank that's on Preston Road in North Dallas, or you go to one that is in Oak Cliff or South Dallas, you are able to, and I want to make sure that I get this name correct because I always botch it and call it something else. Pardon me 1 second here as I look up my text message to make sure that I have it correct. It is the Credit Reinvestment Act rating report that anyone can walk into the bank and request, and it's supposed to tell you who is getting the loans, where they live within the service area of the bank. And one thing that I found that was super interesting with your piece was they kind of get around that by being able to invest in real estate. And I'm like, how? How? Because the people that are owning the real estate don't live within the service area of that bank.
Right. I mean, so they kind of they get creative with the way they try to invest in the communities. One thing was, you know, kind of like the LaTeX projects, but overall, if they are investing in businesses, they're not owned by Black and brown people as far as those businesses or that commercial real estate. But I think it's important as far as on the community side, you know, to walk in and ask for those reports,
Yes.
you know, for those banks to see what they're doing. And for the, I will say, since AT&T is based here, AT&T banks with somebody.
Right.
Is AT&T holding that bank in which they bank with, you know, accountable for what they're doing in the underserved, you know, area. And that goes for any company out there as well as individuals. Let's hold those companies accountable through their banking and deposits relationship. I'm sure if AT&T pulls their money out with one of the big banks, that's going to send a shockwave, and they're going to act right. And that goes for the city of Dallas and in Dallas County. I mean, we can go on and on as far as, you know, some of these government entities or private entities that have these lower deposit accounts. Hey, you need to invest in South Dallas, Oak Cliff, Pleasant Grove. Like, let's invest directly into Black and brown owned businesses, pushing home ownership. Let's make it direct. Let's make it intentional as far as, who's receiving that. I mean, because another thing that, like I said, they'll give it to somebody else
Right.
instead of giving it to people that need it. And then that's
That are
kind of
putting their
suffered over a
deposits
period.
in that bank. Yes, because I can testify. When I was in college, applying for a loan for the same amount that was in my bank account and got denied. And I'm like, okay, what was the point of that? This is, a loan for school for my tuition, and you're telling me I can't do it. And, I hadn't even been out there yet this was my step to build credit, to make myself a viable person. So when it comes time to, buying a home, buying a car, that I would get better rates on my interest rate and just, build that equity in myself so I can build equity for kids that I hadn't thought of yet. I know, right? The story of our lives with, trying to leave this legacy and being shut off from the tools that drive wealth. So it's really interesting. And I don't know if you have the answer for this, because it just seems so interesting that, this report is available, and I'm sure the game is going to change now since I'm putting it out there, and I put it out there before, that these are reports that anybody can walk into any bank and ask for, and they have to give it to you. So I'm sure that's going to change, or you're going to get some deflection and some roadblocks put in your way for actually getting this report. Who put it into the rules that here's a workaround to still get your rating, saying that you're investing in the community, but you can do it by other means by not giving out loans?
The spirit, I mean, since 1977 to now, the spirit of the act has changed, and people have got creative over the years as far as how to do the less amount possible and get the most credit, possible. But I think it also goes back to, are we consistently holding them accountable, every year, like we did in the story, for what they're not doing in the community, and calling it out. One thing in which I did after that story that, of course, the banks know, but most people don't know, I actually wrote a public comment letter in which anybody, any person, or any community organization can write a public comment letter to each one of the banks. I mean, so I wrote 105 letters to all the banks. And so that's kind of, continuously putting the spotlight in writing, documented, on the need in Southern Dallas, and actually holding them accountable for what they're, not doing.
For what they're not doing. But, you have the background in banking, so you have seen the practices. And so, I'm assuming that is what turned you into forming your nonprofit organization, because you're seeing the disparity and the need that's there for us to get the financial literacy, but also change the system. So as you talk about, these big corporations and pulling out their money, municipalities pulling out their money from these banks, and I always love to play devil's advocate. I am said corporation XYZ, and I like having my workers being dumb and blind to what I'm doing. I give them enough money to make them happy, feel like they're doing something. But why would I pull my bank out of my money out of my homeboy's bank, even though I may not know him personally? Why would I do that? That's cut off my nose to spite my face. And my relationship with this bank is more important than making sure that your community has.
I mean, so for the government entities, open records requests will identify, and they have to issue things through RFPs on that side. On the private side, it's a little bit harder to do that. But what I will say, as far as those banks in which the banks are not investing in underserved community, I mean, you can get up to a Department of Justice complaint. Those banks can and will have been fined in the past
Okay.
across the country, and can be fine in the future as far as making them, follow the rules, making them invest in minority communities. I mean, so although for a private company, maybe not direct impact to them, but
Right.
that bank is going to cost them money. They're going to be fine as far as costing them money to force them to do the right thing. And if that company wants to be associated, with that particular bank, we can happily make that public and available, because they're in support of it. And
Right.
obviously of those practices.
Yes. And so, for the regular folks, the school teacher that teaches, pre-K, kindergarten, 8th grade math, how did they find out about this information? Because as I block walk in my community and just telling people, hey, there's a city council race coming up in May, first Saturday in May. I need you to turn out. Just come on, let's not do 10% or less. How is just, these same people supposed to, get this information to know that this is being done to them?
I mean, I think my mom always reminds me that most people are just trying to survive. I mean, so some of the things when it comes to redlining and when it comes to even city council races, I mean, that's, second, their second priority. But I think it's just educating them and empowering them, just to kind of know and put it in simplest terms, for them, how this is affecting them. And we talk about, just simple home ownership, because everybody has to have somewhere to live.
Right.
And even if you talk just basic apartments, I mean, somewhere nice and safe to stay. I mean, I think that's the way you encourage them. But I think also, I mean, we have a priority as far as people like myself that do have this knowledge to speak out,
Right.
sometimes on their behalf. And that what kind of led me from the banking sector over to the nonprofit. I mean, because I do have the knowledge. I did grow up in South Dallas with the Charles Rice. I mean, so,
Right.
and that's personable to me. Instead of sit by and just know this is going on and not doing anything. I mean, we have to speak out. We have to use the knowledge that some of them have given us, to help support the community. And this is factual information. I mean, so it's not necessarily an opinion that they're not investing. We have the data to support that they're not investing.
Okay. So, yeah. It's such a mixed bag, and I'm all for let's be radical, let's flip the table on the system. We have lives, we want to eat. The table is big enough for everyone, but what the table is not big enough for is greed, and that seems to just continue to be this driving factor with Okay, let me rewind that. I'm not going to say greed. Fear seems to be a huge driving factor with minorities making it and accumulating wealth that is equal to the dominant culture and race in this country. And I don't know if the thoughts or the feelings that drives the fear that, if equity comes in that level, that, oh my gosh, my pie is too small for me. And I just want to give you this little 30% for all of y'all to fight for. Well, I have the rest. And it's like, why do you need so much? That all of us have to fight into this one little piece here that you have set aside and designated that is good enough for me.
I think we collectively, we all have to stick together and demand, more, and also, and in demanding more, that's also, equity included. I realize I'm one person, I'm one organization. One thing we're actually working on is to start a coalition, of for-profit and nonprofits to, so we have a lot of people to the party that are commenting, on what these banks are doing. They actually do this in St. Louis and in Florida. They have, similar organizations, and they collectively they hold the banks accountable. And while you may not, be well versed in banking, you can
Right.
tell me what's going on in your neighborhood association better than I can, or
Right.
your part of the community more than I can.
Right.
So bringing that collective knowledge together and say, hey, we particularly need this. Is this something the banks, can support, and what does that look like? I mean, so I think it's always strength in numbers. They're going to continue to give us the bare minimum possible. If we don't organize, we don't hold them accountable. Year to year, and if we don't continue to suggest ideas and areas in which they can invest in. I mean, so the story was a catalyst. I mean, it's the start. It's not the end of anything. The banking regulators are having meetings right now about the story. They actually have. I mean, so that's great that they're taking notice. Because in a sense, it was an embarrassment for them. Say, hey, this small nonprofit identified, a huge area. And like I said, I will reiterate, these are areas that were redlined in 1977. These are not new areas. These are the same exact ones. I mean, so I think that's paramount to realize that.
It's so interesting. So 1977, here we are, 2021. We'll be celebrating another new year, and it'll be 2022 soon. And I'm not saying in the next 90 days, but 2022 is right around the corner. We're supposed to be in the 21st century. And here we are still dealing with the inequities and the fight that our elders had back then, today. And we're still seeing the practices of exclusion that were done back then, still present today. And I just tell people that the game just gets savvier. And so it's so interesting to hear that your story, your research's story has sparked conversations with the banking industry because it was an embarrassment. And I'm that girl. And I hate to call myself a girl because I'm a woman. I'm a super adult. I see them looking at the game and saying, how can we level up again so they don't see where the cheese is being moved? I don't see that there's going to become a fix or steps to fix. I think that we will get some token things given to make us hush, to make us feel like, they're doing something, but the game just levels up to exclude us still. But
I think one of the things, and we're going to be forming a database that'll make it publicly easy for anybody to look and see what these banks are doing. We've kind of requested some funds from some private foundations in regards to that. But I think they will get savvier, but we will get smarter. The added advantage that I would tell any bank, I know how to get around South Dallas. You don't. I know how to get around Oak Cliff. I know how to walk into a neighborhood association. When somebody asks me what street I grew up on, I can identify with that. So I know the exact needs of the community better than you probably ever will, because I have, 30 years plus experience as far as this community. I mean, so we're gonna actually stay on them about that. And there are some other banks that are doing, smaller banks that are doing phenomenal, work. And some of the one bank branches, and they've come together to do some amazing things. But the big banks, the Wells Fargo, the Bank of America, the Chase, they have to do more. These small banks, pound for pound, are outperforming some of the big banks. And when you look at the number of loans approved in Southern Dallas compared to Northern Dallas, I mean, it's a huge disparity, and they know that. I mean, so they have to do something about it. And they have I say the big banks because they have the money and the manpower.
Yeah, they have the resources to do it.
And I think that's one of the good things in which, me coming from banking, if you're a one branch bank and you're in North Dallas, I know what your capacity to do. I know it's a little bit smaller, but if you're a Chase, it's almost unlimited. As far as just do your part as far as your asset size. And they are $1 trillion as far as their asset size. Let me put that out there. They're the biggest bank in the US. I mean, so they have to do more.
Wow. That number is staggering that you just said. That's staggering. That, and banks love to get deposits because that is money that they can lend on. That helps their credit rating score and play into that system with having those assets that they can lend out. And gosh, this topic just brings up so much with me because I'm thinking about city bonds and how many of our projects don't get the funding, yet our taxes, property taxes, reflect those bond dollars being charged to us, but we don't get the project completions. Here we have banking that is supposed to be serving us in our communities with the limited number of banks that we do have, and we see that the number of loans in comparison to north of I-30 is night and day. And one of the things, and I'll make sure that I include the link from the piece on the show, because it was really interesting to see the lines that were being drawn on banks and what areas they were going to serve. And a lot of times our area south of 30, I mean, it's like a river that literally cuts the city in half, that those areas were not even being touched. It wasn't even a conversation that we were going to go in and service those areas.
Yeah, I mean, and they're doing it deliberately. I mean, if you look at where the minorities live at and where we don't, I mean, you can see, we're 90%, probably 90% below I-30 as far as Southern Dallas, and that goes to track for Southern Dallas County in its entirety. But like I said, they're making that conscious effort. We must demand that they include and lend in our areas, and they may say that it's a higher risk. I mean, but they make exceptions, to all kinds of loans. In the most of those exceptions are done up north. I mean, so it's possible if they are willing. If you look at the data for some of the banks that are doing it, they're the smaller banks, but they're profitable. I mean, so they're making money. I mean, so it's not like it's impossible to make money. You have to be in touch with the community and know their needs and adjust your products to meet those needs.
Right.
And I think that's one of the spirits of the CRA. It was to meet the needs of the community. If you don't even know the community, how you meet the needs? I mean, that's what I brought up recently to a few banks. They said, "Hey, we did this. You thought what was best for our community. What did you use?
How did you find that out?" Yeah. Man, that's so once again being dictated and told what it is that we need. So I want to talk about those exceptions. What are those exceptions? What do they look like? Because I'm super curious now.
So on the commercial side, and it mainly happens on the commercial loan side, there's not a automated system. It's a loan review committee. And so what may not be said, if you apply for a loan, let's say to do a commercial real estate project in South Dallas, they may, mention crime, and we're not going to do that loan. And we apply for a similar project above I-30, and crime can be the same because they're not even looking it up there, but it may be the loan to value may be too high, or the person's credit may not be up to par. I mean, so there's a variety of reasons, but what they'll do is go ahead and make that exception, and somebody will sign off on it and do that loan. Down south, they'll use what they think as far as crime to kind of, in a sense, no, we're going to not proceed with their project. And they're going to make up an excuse not to say it's cause of crime to decline you. But if you look at the numbers and the paperwork, I mean, it would be identical to that project up north. And the only thing different is the demographic of people that live there. Like I said, the crime is, just a theory, which I remind people, like, look at the crime data, and yes, it's crime everywhere. But I mean, it's always deterrence. And you can see it in what I remind them, look at your commercial loans up north and look at your commercial loans, down south, Southern Dallas.
Right.
There's a glaring difference.
Yes. So if you're just tuning in, this is James McGee with Southern Dallas Progress. And we're diving in deeper with his discussion and the story that was on WFAA. And just sitting here while we've been having this discussion, I found a Community Reinvestment Act performance evaluation. And grant you, it was not for a bank in Dallas. It is for a First Federal Community Bank in Dover, Ohio. And so it behooves you as a person in your community, especially if you are residing south of I-30, to look at what these reports entail. Because, grant you, James McGee knows the industry inside and out. He worked in it, he understands it. But as a lay person, you need to understand, what it is that they're looking at, the overall CRA rating, the description of the institution, and the scope of the evaluation. So these are the things that they're going to be looking at to say, this is, what we found happening at this institution. And so, Jay, it was just amazing to look at the description. And grant you, this is not, they even label it as an intermediate bank. $451.2 million intrastate bank headquarter in Dover, Ohio. I mean, 451.2 million. That's a whole lot of zeros. And goes through, talking about including business loans and residential mortgages and home equity lines of credit and all types of consumer loan products, automobile loans, all this kind of stuff, and goes into the evaluation period and the products that were evaluated. I don't see anything being listed here on, saying being a investor in subpar real estate in blight areas. But the biggest thing that stood out for me in this 23-page report is discriminatory or other illegal credit practices review. And the OOC has not identified that this institution has engaged in any discriminatory or other illegal credit practices that require consideration in this evaluation. Now, I don't know much about Dover, Ohio, so I can't say what the makeup is. I'm straight laughing. And I know you know where I'm going with this. And that is such, this plastic, how high, the fake smile and hello statement of saying, yeah, we didn't find anything. And I'm sure you've seen this on reports with your research for banks in our area saying the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, so even in the story, all those banks passed their exams, even though they're currently, they are currently, redlining. But I go back to people coming together and, in a sense, learning how to fight and communicating that. Because if you go back to the Wells Fargo fallout for the fake bank accounts, that wasn't a regulator or a bank examiner finding out that was employees inside taking a stand and called it to the forefront. And some of the other redlining cases across the country, it has been the community bringing that to the attention. So for the lesson here for us in Dallas is to continue to, complain, whether you can reach out to me or reach out to your whoever you bank with and ask them detailed questions, ask them to sit there and explain it to you. I mean, because we do have the power of the community and our voices to call out a lot of this stuff. Thankfully, WFAA, I kind of, they talked to me and wanted to do another story, but we worked together to, do the banking, but below 30. But I think it's, it still goes back to how do we, the community, hold them accountable. And one of the other things in which we've been looking at, so when a banking branch is being open, they put it in the paper. They put it in the newspaper. I check every day now. Anybody can check. And they ask you, is this bank meeting the needs of the community? And so all of those banks, let me say, have been the ones that have opened within the last year have been in Northern Dallas. I mean, so are they meeting the needs of the Southern Dallas community? No, they're not. But collectively, we're all writing in and saying, hey, they're not. because they're just looking at James. James the only one complaining. No, we need more people to complain. And that comes back to the point. We do have reverse redlining. I mean, so I tell people to look up what the meaning of reverse redlining is. It's in a sense where we have, today 400 banks up north plus 54 in Southern Dallas in its entirety. I mean, and so we see the blight in our community. That's the after effects of reverse redlining. I mean, so they're redlining, and this is the after effect. We don't have a lot of investments. We have tons of blight, and things like that. And so we have, apartments, and we have people that are more renters than homeowners because we don't have the small businesses in which we do have, they're smaller because they don't have the access to capital to grow. Well, who has all the capital? It's all the banks. And I think one thing you got to mention, there's about 6,000 banks in the U.S. There are 122 minority-owned banks.
Okay.
There are 20 Black-owned banks. I mean, so we go 6,000 to 20. That's a huge disparity. And even those 20 banks are very small banks. I mean, so they in a sense, while they're good, I support them. They can't compete with some of these banks. I mean, and I'll give you an example is that those 20 banks, Next Bank, which is only in Dallas, has almost $10 billion in assets. That one bank, only in Dallas, has more assets than all 20 Black-owned banks. I mean, so that'd be assets like 10 billion. I mean, they have a large amount of money. The more deposits you have, the more money you can lend out and invest and do things like that. I mean, so Black banks are important. As far as that's important that we support them, but that doesn't mean we let the hook. We don't let the bigger banks off the hook as far as being accountable.
Okay, and that's great to know that we have 20. It's a start, because that was one of the points that I wanted to dive into is with this system, and we know how we're having to play into it. Does it benefit us to have our own banks? And I would love for you to come back and talk about how to become a bank, because that is no easy feat with, going from, a credit union to getting and it's all about number of deposits, that dollar amount that can get you to that next level to becoming a bank. And so hearing that one bank has more assets than all 20 Black-owned banks it just screams, the inequity that's going on. So you brought up reverse redlining, and I know, because I sent the question to you, well, what happens, when we see our areas becoming gentrified? Do the banks now all of a sudden come running over? So when South Dallas looks like it did when the Jewish community was living in it, and all of the whites were living in South Dallas, so we're going to see a bank on every corner like we do in North Dallas.
And so, South Dallas and West Dallas is the prime example. You have banks right now that give you a loan that would give you a loan over there 10 years ago. And what you do have is demographic, honestly, that's changing. I mean, it's underinvested in because of them. And now they come in screaming savior as far as, we'll do a loan, particularly in that neighborhood, when some of the people that actually live in the neighborhood haven't moved. I mean, so this is the same neighborhood, the same one you said, for whatever reason, had high crime, or you can get the correct appraisal value, back then, but you can get it now. No, what you have is a demographic of people, non-minorities, that are building and buying in this place. Therefore, you're financing it. I mean, so it's almost in a sense, the perfect storm as far as like discrimination. I mean, like you wouldn't give it to the Hispanic or the Black back then 10 years ago, but you'll give it to the white person at a double. That was probably $150,000 house. Now you get $350 in the same area on the same street, and in some places. I mean, but they have to do better. And I mean, a lot of banks we're trying to look at to see which banks are financing gentrification. I mean, so that's another story. Yes. But hey, hold them accountable too for financing it, because they're the cause of the disinvestment. You can't profit off of the same thing which you caused.
You called it a war zone before. Look, in real estate investment training seminars and whatnot, they tell you not to invest in war zones. But South Dallas, I'm seeing new houses being built left and right. I go block walking, and somebody who used to live in the house, I'm like going, is anybody even there? And I'm peeking in the windows and seeing, oh, there's, new cabinets on the floor. So nobody lives here. They're rehabbing it. And, and I know, so this had to have been back in 2013 that, South Dallas was being called a war zone. And now we have houses that, are appraising at $350,000. You can't get the house that needs rehabbing for $10,000 or $15,000 anymore.
And that's the weird thing, is that I think the highest house, which I know of in South Dallas, proper, sold for $500,000. I know the one in West Dallas, I know the highest, I think, is $650,000. I mean, So these are crazy amounts for these areas in which y'all wouldn't give $100,000 loan to,
right?
Just less than 2 years ago.
Look, I couldn't get $2,000 loaned to me, and I literally had $2,081 in my bank account. And I'm like, I'm a college student. I want to pay for tuition, and I don't. Hey, and what are you told? Don't use your money, keep your cash in hand, and use somebody else's money to fund your project so you can level up and double your money. And so here I was trying to make an investment in myself, and you're telling me I wasn't even worthy of doing that, even though I still had the cash in hand and asked for the same amount that was in my bank account.
Correct. And I think that's one of the stories I think New York Times kind of posted, investing in Black developers. So we have all these initiatives and all these headlines. Who's receiving the money? If on the nonprofit side, is it minority-led nonprofit? How big are they? Invest in the smaller ones. Right. If it's a developer, are they Black and brown? If it's a homeowner, who are you financing those mortgages, for? And also, where are you focusing? I always remind the banks, it's a low income census tract, and then there's a moderate. That's, if we're talking about equity, let's invest in the low income census tract, the ones that are, have been, going down, for years. And then kind of HUD defines, like, recap as 40% poverty, 40% minority. Let's be intentional and invest in those areas too, because those are the ones in which that they have the most need. No, it's not the easiest, but that's the one that's for the most need. And that's how we can start to, help the community. I mean, it's frustrating from the banking, for being inside the bank and then going to the community, because a lot of these banks are not trying to do anything above what they've already required, what they're so-called required to do. But that's the importance of holding them accountable. That's the importance of the regulators actually, coming down. But the community, like I said, we have to, it's a news story, don't lose the hype. I mean, this has to continue though from here, and 10, 15, 20 years later, we still have to be having this conversation, about holding them accountable.
Yes, and I, to reinforce what you're saying, in my early days when I was at the Park South YMCA taping this show and being over talked by people in the lobby and common area discussing why we have a Federal Reserve Bank, discussing the CRA Act of 1977. I did that back in 2017. Here it is, 2021, and I'm bringing this topic back up because it needs to be talked about. And I'm not saying that I would sleep on it. I've had this conversation, plenty of people, about, having a bank in South Dallas, taking the church credit union, and how to do that transformation with getting those deposits, getting it up to a level past the credit union stage, and how we can, fund ourselves with, the mortgages, the auto loans, all of those things, so we can accumulate wealth for ourselves, because obviously somebody does not want us to accumulate wealth for ourselves, to keep us poor, to keep us disenfranchised, and somebody out there profits off of poorness.
I mean, that's a good point. So city late last year, they released a study, and it said, pretty much discriminatory practices It cost us. It has cost us $16 trillion. But like I said, it goes back to what you just stated. I mean, people are profiting, off poverty in a sense. I mean, and for even since for Northern Dallas to remain elite and to maintain their property values to remain going up, something has to go down. And for right now, Southern Dallas has been that choosing place to go down. And the only way you change that is the demand, investments, number one for the banks, demand, investments from DISD and the city of Dallas. If you look at all three of them, as far as where they've invested their money, you'll see a glaring, difference. I mean, yeah. But the banks are the ones we kind of do a good job as for the city trying to hold their feet to the fire, but then we don't hold the banks at all accountable for what they're not, doing, in the community. I mean, so we have to hold those big banks, like I said, again, like small banks. We hold them accountable. Go in there and have a conversation. Write them a letter. If you get declined, put it in writing. Ask them particularly, why all that stuff is tracked, and so it's going to help. With once we do stories and once we file our HUD complaint that's coming, we're gonna. It's going to help support, what we're saying as fact, and therefore, like I said, we'll create some more innovative programs, to serve our underserved community.
It's amazing, and thank you for the work that you're doing, because it's much needed. I love people that make good trouble, and this has been a great conversation, because next week not next week because we're doing the observance for Easter, but the following week, April 10th, I am having the discussion on what it is to be a whistleblower. And what protections come. That was perfect timing, Jay. Perfect timing. Because you mentioned, bank employees. And, if you're out here blowing the whistle on, businesses, corporations that are not doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, you will have hell to pay for blowing that whistle. And so I need people to understand what it means to be a whistleblower and what protections are there for you, even though you can experience some PTSD symptoms as a result, because people who should have the lid blown on them don't want the lid removed and the truth to come out.
And that's a good topic. So when they we were researching this, there was several people involved in the research. Child Poverty Action Lab was one of the main ones local here that provide a lot of the data. But in a sense, when it was brought to me, I want to do a news story,
right?
About exposing this bank, knowing I know several people that still work, in the bank for various banks and have sit on some of the banking committees and things like that. It was a scary feeling. Like, what do I do? I mean, it goes back to, what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the right thing. And, the information in which I'm saying is factual information. And whoever doesn't like the facts, they can do something about it from their internal banking circle, or they can get mad. But it wasn't going to stop me. I mean, because I have the voice. I mean, I have the knowledge to speak for. I wasn't only speaking for myself, but I was also speaking for the community in which they don't have a voice. They don't have the banking experience. I mean, so, it's scary, but I encourage people, just do the right thing. Things fall in as they should. We still have had some outstanding banks that are coming forth and that want to do something. And we still have some banks that suck and that don't want to do anything. But I mean, like I said, speak your mind, be truthful, be honest, but support people that don't have that voice, don't have that position or that knowledge. I mean, I think that's, I think that's a really, really important thing. And on the other side, we have people trying to take advantage of people that don't have the knowledge. I mean, so, I know personally, I won't stand for that. I mean, because that's, that's in another form of abuse. So just do the right thing, stand up. And some people work inside these different banks and organizations that kind of witness some stuff we don't know about. Speak up.
Yes. So I definitely want people to understand, being a whistleblower comes with a huge price tag, making sure that you understand what your protections are. and, finding attorneys that practice in that area so they can help you with this. Because, this is a huge game. This is, at the end of the day, our lives, our community, our ability to put, food on the table for our families, being able to, buy into and also own a piece of that so-called American dream. And it is interesting, with last week having Cecil Lofton on the show and talking about, the MWBE process with DISD. I've had Tawana Hayward Bay on the show talking about, the processes with the cities there in Gracie from the city of Dallas. And, here it is, yes, you want to be that certified minority business, and we can make a list of the things that are stacked up against you to not be able to get to that level, to have the capacity, to be able to get those business loans, to grow your operations so you can, be a better subcontractor or a prime contractor. And once again, it just puts a fire in my belly. So Fred Jones, you'll probably get another phone call, and I know for sure a text message from me, because, everybody wants to sweep the racism under the rug and say that it doesn't exist. And here you have the proof in the pudding on paper with the redlining that shows the banking practices that are exclusionary in nature and practice from people of color in their communities. And it's just, it's
mind-blowing. One of the things, I love the disparity studies that the city of Dallas did, and DISD, but one of the access to capital is one of the things in which I've identified in the reports. And I forward them to the bank, say, hey, look here, this is additional information, research done by a third party. And these companies are saying they need access to capital, yet instead you say, you can't find any qualified businesses or anything like that. And I said, let me tell you about the MBE certification process, or even if you were to complete a request for proposal, those are not easy tasks. I mean, so we do have businesses out here that are qualified. So you're not looking intentionally to do business, with us and also in our community.
Yeah, it mind-blowing, disheartening, sickening. I have a whole host of emotions going through me. And again, I'm gonna have to bring this topic back up again, because, it will fall on some deaf ears. Some people just, they're not awake yet to say this is something that they need to pay attention to. And it touches all of us. It touches all of us, be it from the lack, of having a grocery store in our area, to being able to get the loan, to, inequity and having jobs that are closer to your house outside of just warehouse jobs. Because I'm still waiting for the IT jobs to show up close that I can just hop on a bus and get. And I was told that I should stop being selfish because those jobs just aren't for me. Well, dadgummit, yes, they are.
I mean, I think that's and it's a whole circle. When the schools close down, it's due to lack of population of students attending those schools, but then you don't have any new houses being built. The population, but what do you need to build the houses? You need capital. So that's why new schools open, because they're building new communities. So it's a population. Grocery stores follow rooftops. But it all circles back around to banks and investing, in housing. And that's, not apartments are an important part of the cycle, but they're like, we really need home ownership. That puts in a sense, from a wealth standpoint, in the homeowners, hand, and then also capital for a small business. So smaller minority businesses, I always say, because we are not over $1 million yet. We're probably 300,000 to 400,000. At best. So yes, we're going to require the smaller loans. No, you don't make as much money on those loans, but the need and the impact is much greater as far as investing, in those businesses. And that's the same thing as for supporting, locally owned businesses, locally banks that are headquartered in Dallas. Let me say that also, because they're not going anywhere. Some of the other banks are headquartered in other places that are really, doing more investment in where they're headquartered at than what they're doing here in Dallas.
Right. So we could keep going at this all day. So I want to reserve the discussion around Evanston, Illinois, and the reparations of $25,000 that people have received there because when you brought up HUD, I mean, that takes the lid off a whole bunch of things when, HUD spanked the city of Dallas and now they can't, do certain low income housing in Southern Dallas because it's concentrated. And so now what do we do? And again, another layer off of the onion of the inequity conversation that is rooted in, how people of color, indigenous people, slaves were treated on this land. And the founding fathers of Dallas, because they were they were in the banking system, so they knew how the game worked and was played and helped set up the rules on why Dallas still looks the way that it does. And have that conversation, because $25,000 in Evanston is like literally your sink dripping, occasionally as far as housing. And if you're talking about, inequities and having to put 20% down, how are you going to come up with another $25,000 if you can find a place up there that meets your needs for $500,000? And
it goes back to what you said, that they're doing the minimum possible and want the most credit. So how do they calculate this $25,000? It's a nice gesture, but how did you calculate this? Right. What input? Is this the first payment of 4 or 5, or is this the one and only? I mean, they're continuously, just say, hey, take this or nothing. You have to accept this. We have to demand better, demand a little bit more research and data behind, these requirements. And then also, I always say, come together and do it ourselves. No, we're not all data experts. I'm sure, we get together a group of 100 people, family and friends, we can kind of come up, with some research. They may know somebody, and it may be pro bono work, but to me, it's the work that keeps on giving. As for the impact and the story you can tell, like your kids and your grandkids about, hey, I was part, of that particular movement.
Yes.
I think we cannot continue to set the bare minimum. I mean, no.
Yeah. As Lauryn Hill said, respect is just the minimum. That is not the maximum. And we have to keep pushing forward for more. So, Jay, thank you so much for coming on and diving deeper into this conversation. But I definitely want you to come back, because we definitely need to talk about that 25,000 contribution. I'm gonna call it a contribution, not reparations. It's a contribution. It's like my campaign. Yeah, I need some more checks to get that game going like I want it going. The contribution, and what does that mean? And, the struggle that we continue to have with achieving home ownership. And, an article that was written about a couple, these are PhD people, and they're still renters because they were not viewed as being credit worthy enough for a $400,000 loan. They got a PhD after their name. So you would think, shoot, you can do this. You have the security. You on paper, you are exactly the kind of customer that we want, and still got no. Still got no. So this whole thing of, not sagging pants and, speaking the King's English correctly. Hey, you can't get no better on paper than having a PhD. MD, JD behind your name is still, you can get turned down based on the system that we're playing in that creates and maintains the inequity in our community. So Jay, thank you so much again. And I want you to come back to, so we can expound upon that even further, but you have your work. I'll let the HUD show come out, that piece come out. Because I'm sure there's some.
Thank you for having me. I mean, the HUD complaint is real, that is factual, but in all sense, for anybody, or say anybody, because that includes, government entities, anybody that's redlining, I mean, we should never have to file a complaint or get any type of judgment, whether it be those
Right.
Supreme Court in HUD versus Walker, or just a local decision to stop you from doing what's right.
Right.
I mean, these inequities currently exist, and we should not have to file or take you to court or anything like that just to do the right thing. I mean, but in the case in which you don't, like, we will, our community would not be continue to be underserved. I mean, so, and like I said, we'll continue to support, everybody that's, willing to fight alongside of us and with us. I mean,
Right.
in the fight for equity, here, like in Dallas and across the nation. The story kind of did go to 10 states. I mean, so there are other states that are interested in kind of doing something similar in their own community. I mean, but
Right.
it's a big problem. And like I said, we're here to fight it.
Okay, thank you again so much, and that work. So again, anybody who watches the show, you want to start this in your community, you want to help in Dallas, definitely reach out to James McGee with Southern Dallas Progress. They have a Facebook page. I'll put the link on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page, to get involved, because our lives depend on it. And future lives of kids that we don't even know are coming depend on this. And knowing how automation is going to impact jobs and is going to impact us more significantly than others, and seeing that we're only 12, 13% of the population, I kind of, and that's a whole nother topic in itself, because I would argue that a whole bunch of little mixed kids are not even being called Black, even though they have a parent that is Black. They're being called, 2 or more races. So, we need to come together in this, because it will not be given. We will have to take it, and we will have to show how ugly this game out here is, and smack people with the receipts, because we're going to have to bring them. So again, thank you, James J. McGee, for coming on. Anybody who wants to get in contact with him, you can't find his Facebook page. Definitely hit me up, and I will do a warm introduction via email for you, so you can get on the ground floor with doing this work. So next Saturday of April the 10th, we have whistleblower attorney Molly Nobler, who is going to come on to discuss what it means to blow that whistle and what protections are afforded to you by law. So when you get in this game to help Jay, how your back is covered, so you know how to maneuver on this game. So again, thank you so much, Jay, and tune in next Saturday, April the 10th, because we won't have a show on April 3rd for Easter observance. All righty, thank you everyone for this, and be safe